What is happening, everybody? It is TD Showbiz again, and I'm Nathaniel, and we are going to be reading another book today called Conspiracy: The Greatest Plots, Collusions, and Cover-Ups. Written by somebody, I don't know, I can't see it. Chapter 1. They've got your number. Flight MH370, The Great Disappearing Act. On March 8th, 2014, Malaysian Airlines Flight MH370 took off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport, bound for Beijing, with 239 people on board. Less than an hour into the flight, radio contact was lost, and the plane vanished from air traffic controllers' radar screens. Only later was it discovered that the Malaysian military radar had continued to track the plane as it veered westwards across the Malin Peninsula, then northwest up the Straits of Malacca towards the Admin Sea. Eventually, sophisticated analysis of the satellite communications from the plane's automated systems indicated that it had turned southwards, and the search moved to the South Indian Ocean. One piece of debris, a flapern broken off from the wing, was stuck on July 29, 2015, on the French island of Renault, some 2,500 miles west from the search area. Since then, other small pieces of wreckage that might have come from the wings and engine of the missing aircraft have been found along the coast of the East Africa, where oceanographers said that currents could have carried the debris from the search area. However, a search of the sea floor where the plane was supposed to have crashed, lasting 3 years and costing $1.3 million in US and 105 million pounds, could find no sign of the huge fuselage of the Boeing 777. And if the plane had broken up on impact, how come none of the debris could expect to float? Seat cushions, life jackets, luggage, even corpses have ended up floating in the sea, but none were found. There is some strange events. This has spawned all sorts of conspiracy theories, from a hijacking gone wrong to pilot suicide, an accidental shoot-down, alien abduction, and even that had been sustained from the MH17 shot down over Ukraine 3 months later. One of the most intriguing came from the aviation expert Jeff Wise, who led CNN's coverage of the disappearance of MH370. It centered on the fact that 20 employees of Freescale Semiconductors, an avionics firm said to specialize in stealth technology, went on board. Wise noted that the plane had initially assumed to have been flown north from the Admin Sea, and Malaysian Prime Minister Nobruski had applied to be president of Kazakhstan, Nurustan, Navurbistan, formerly First Secretary of the Communist Party of Kazakhstan, and an ally of the Vladimir Putin to follow Malaysian to set up a search area in Kazakhstan. Those darn Teutons. Indeed. Only later was it that the plane had thought to travel south to crash into the sea in one of the most remote spots on the Earth. Re-examining the satellite data, Wise and the independent group, a band of like-minded aviation experts, decided that the plane had indeed crashed. Flew north, while bogus data has yet been found. To a satellite. Checking the passenger list, he found that 2 Ukrainians and a Russian were on board. What this means, I don't know. They probably just wanted to fly in the plane. Little was known about them, except that Ukrainians come from Odessa, a former Soviet naval base, going to the motherland. And the Russians' hobby came from... The Russians' hobby was scuba diving. He was from somewhere, we don't really know. He was sitting up front in business class with 2 Ukrainians further back in economy. Take that, stupid Ukrainians. Wise reckons that Russian came on plane with bag of scuba gear containing 3 face diving masks. Once the plane had reached the cruising altitude and the cabin staff were locked in the other wings of the plane, he slipped into the electronics and equipment, or E/E bay, which was on the Boeing 777. Could be ascended through a hatch at the front of the first class cabin. From there, he could control all systems of the plane. First, he would have to cut off all communication, then plugged in portable equipment that would upload false satellite data to the system from the E/E bay. He could depressurize the cabin while he and his other 2 accomplices breathed oxygen through their diving masks. It could also be an inside job. As he turned the plane to the west, the flight crew could have spotted something was wrong. But there would have been nothing they could have done about it. None of their checklists would have covered a possible hijacking from the E/E bay. The anti-hijacking lock on the cockpit door could have also been controlled from there. When it was open, 2 burly men wearing oxygen masks entering, giving the hijackers total control of the plane. While the crew and passengers lapsed into unconsciousness, the plane flew across the Malin Peninsula along the Malaysian-Thai border, where it was unlikely that anyone would be looking out for a rogue aircraft. Then, the plane turned again and flew up to the Straits of Malacca between Thailand and Indonesia. The disappearance of Flight MH370 remains one of the greatest mysteries in aviation history. How is it possible to evade tracking systems of so many different authorities? The world may never know. Indeed, turning southwards, Wise reckons that Flight MH370 continued northwards to Kakistan, sending its last electronic handshake to the satellite near Bunkar Kumadom in Kakistan, which is leased by the Russian to launch the rocket supplying the space station. Bunkar had a runway nearly 15,000 feet long, built to the land the Burian space plane, the Soviet Union's version of the space satellite, whose program was cancelled in 1993. This is the only airstrip in the world built specifically for the self-landing aeroplane and the 777 was an auto-landing system that meant that even someone who had no experience flying commercial aircraft could land the plane safely. The plain truth. However, Bunkirk is in the middle of a flat, trenchless plain, in a difficult place to hide something as big as a Boeing 777. And the hijackers would have had just 90 minutes to hide it before the sun came up. Studying satellite imagery, Wise noted that a huge building at Bunker, which had been left to rot after the Burian project had been abandoned, had recently been demolished where it had been, and there was now a large patch around the size of a 777, covered with rubble where the plane could have been hidden. Wise says he can offer no motive for the hijacking. However, both during the Vietnam War and World War II, the Soviets seized American Allied prisoners who had specialized technical knowledge. If the cabin had been repressurized after the hijackers had taken over the plane, the 20 employees of the Freescale could now be producing the last stealth cloak systems for the Russians.
On Monday, 23rd August 2010, GCHQ codebreaker Gareth Williams failed to turn up for work again. He was fired at the Secret Intelligence Service, commonly known as MI6, where he had been seconded. No one had seen him for over a week. The police were sent around to the security service plant in Pimlico, London, not far from the world-famous Tate Britain Art Gallery, where he was staying. After forcing entry, officers found his body, naked and cold and composing, inside a red sports holdall. It had been padlocked from the outside, but as the key was inside the bag under Williams' body, there were no injuries on the body, and no indications that he had struggled against an attacker or tried to escape. The bag was in the bath, but no finger, foot, or palm prints or DNA belonging to Williams were found on the rim of the bath, or on the padlock, or zipper, and he was not wearing any pants. But that was implied saying he was naked, so there was no sign of a break-in, and the heating in the flat had been turned up, even though it was midsummer, which helped speed up decomposition. Toxicology examinations showed no trace of alcohol or drugs. And an initial post-mortem provided inconclusive. Nothing was missing from the flat, and a couple seen leaving the building were soon ruled out of the investigation. Williams' family believed that his death was linked to his work at SIS, and the fingerprints, DNA, and other evidence had been wiped from the scene as part of a deliberate cover-up. Indeed, the authorities were plainly sensitive about the investigation. Foreign Secretary William Hague signed a public immunity certification authorizing the withholding of the details of William's secret work and exempting officers of America's National Security Agency and the FBI of Williams had worked for with the testifying at the inquest. SIS Chief Sir John Sauls also met with the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Sir Paul Stevenson, to discuss how the investigation would be handled and who would handle it. There we go. As a direct result, the coroner, Dr. Fiona Wilcox, was critical of the police handling of the investigation. Officers in the MET's counterterrorism branch, SO-15, whose role was to interview SIS witnesses, failed to take formal statements and withheld information from the senior investigating officer, Detective Chief Inspector Jackie Sabri. The coroner also criticized the handling of an iPhone belonging to Williams and found it in his work locker, which contained deleted images of him naked in a pair of boots. That's awkward. An iPhone found in his living room. How many phones does this man have? Recently been wiped and restored to factory settings. LGC forensics were also criticized over DNA contamination, and the coroner's office was censored for failing to inform the police officer of a second post-mortem. Wilcox dismissed evidence of Williams' interest in bondage in the secret dressing as irrelevant. Only a tiny percentage of his internet browsing involved visiting bondage sites, which you shouldn't do. Williams was naked in the bag, not dressed, in women's clothing, and she condemned leaks to the media about him cross-dressing as a possible attempt by some third party to manipulate a section of evidence. The idea that he had locked himself in the bag for some autoerotic thrill was also ruled out. The coroner said Williams was a scrupulous thrill risk assessor. If he had locked himself in the bag, he would have taken a knife in and would aid his escape. Her conclusion was that Williams was probably alive when put in the bag, but probably suffocated very soon afterwards, either from CO2 poisoning, hypothermia, or a bad case of the rumblies in his tumblies. Or, of course, the effect of short-acting poison.
Her conclusion was that William was probably alive. Wait, I already read it, I'm sorry. Fresh claims alleges that allegations that Williams had been working for the NSA, tracking money siphoned out of Moscow by the Russian mafia. Cars registered to the Russian embassy were spotted near his Palmco flat in the days before his body was discovered. There were indications that someone had broken in through a skylight the day after his body had been found and tampered with the evidence. Then, KGB defector Boris Kromkovsky, exiled to the UK, said that Williams had been discovered by a Russian agent inside GCHQ after a bungled attempt to recruit him as a double agent by blackmailing him over his private life. Coincidentally, he had to be killed. This was done by a short-lived poison injected into his ear. Ouch! That sounds very painful, and I don't see how you don't see that coming. The heating was turned up in the flat so that the traces of the toxin would break down before the body was found. There was also speculation that the CIS might have been responsible, featuring that Williams might have been a whistleblower. Then he bumped him off. With their close cooperation with the police, this could have been easy to cover up. Alexander Luktofo, death of a double agent, was a high filter in the KGB. He was exiled to the Federal Security Service, or FSB, which replied the KGB after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on the mountainside, and with him 140 and 40,000, having his father's name written in their foreheads. And I heard a voice from the heavens, as the voice of many waters, and the voice of a great thunder. And I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. Seems kind of like, you would know that because they're harpers and they'd be playing harps, but And they sung as if a new song before the throne and before the four beasts and the elders, and no man could learn that song because it was too hard to play. But the 140 and 40,000 which were redeemed from the earth, these are they which are not defiled with woman, for they are virgins. They are which follow the Lamb whatsoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb. Fearing gravity's pull, how did gravity make its influence felt? Obviously, it was a force that acted at a distance and didn't require any physical contact to work. Also, unlike any other force, it is impossible to shield yourself from its effects. Newton's universal law of gravity has been backed up by observation and experiment, time and time again. According to Newton, gravity made its effects felt simultaneously. If the sun were to suddenly disappear, the Earth would shoot out of its orbit in a same second. Einstein and
Einstein. Right?
Ah, yes, Einstein. Einstein and Galileo have shown if you were to uniform motion, and it's impossible to demonstrate that if you were actually moving, all observations making uniformly relative to each other, entitled to say that they are stationary and which everyone else is moving. Retain your self-confidence. It always hurts to have someone think you'll either, you or your case, especially in your opponent, has some sort of prestige. In order to build up your self-confidence and to offset the image of you being a failure, you have to join your opposition. Try the following. Image that you are a man or woman who was attacked. You is standing there without any clothes on. Well, this just turned kind of awkward and graphic. This is enough to make anyone look ridiculous. Or imagine a special kind of ignorance, stupidity, blindness, or combustionness. Therefore, that might possibly lead to someone to disagree with your case. Aristotle, blocking argument. Aristotle literally means to bottle up, to or prevent, and it prevents parties from arguing or asserting certain facts. Often, Aristotle is related to the idea of reliance. If the counterparty revealed on the first party's statement of the facts or accusations in a particular situation, the first party is stopped from asserting otherwise. The first party is blocked from claiming facts inconsistent with the similar earlier exploit and implement statement. One moment. Ah, there we go. And there came one of the 7 angels, which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show you thy judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom of the kings and earth have committed fornication, and inhabitants of the earth have been made to drink the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sat upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Man, that's a lot of horns. Definitely don't want to sit in that guy. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mysterious Babylon, the great, the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the stains and with the blood of merits of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman, and the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast thou which sawest was, and this is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is, and yet is. And here is the mind, which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains, in which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings, 5, all fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not, yet come, and when he cometh, he must continue a short pace.
Thank you for listening to our stories. Tune in next week, but it'll probably be tomorrow. That just sounds better. To hear a story.